I recently moved into a cozy little house in a quiet suburb. I really enjoy the peace and freedom of this solitary life. The house is small but comfortable, with a queen-size bed, a small kitchen, and a window overlooking the garden. That night, I had just finished organizing my work materials for the next day and was ready to go to bed. Suddenly, my mobile phone rang, and the vibration was particularly loud in the quiet room. I picked it up and saw an unfamiliar number on the screen. I hesitated for a moment, but picked it up anyway. A little girl's voice came from the other end of the phone. She seemed to be crying. Her voice was full of fear and despair. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I could only comfort her and ask her how she was. She continued to cry, her voice revealing a deep sense of helplessness. I tried to make sense of the situation by asking her how she knew my phone number, but she just kept crying and kept asking me to help her. I said, "Then can you tell me where you are now? Otherwise, I can't help you." The little girl's crying stopped abruptly.
Lisa.
She called out my name and then giggled.
I am right outside your door.
My heart tightened, and I immediately hung up the phone as fear gripped my entire body. I quickly walked over to the window and tried to make out any clues in the darkness. But the world outside looked as if it had been swallowed up by darkness. Nervousness and panic led me to call the police. The operator's voice was calm and professional, but to my ears it sounded like it came from another world. She asked for some information about me, and then asked if I could hear any unusual sounds at the moment. I pricked up my ears to carefully identify them, but found that it was very quiet outside. No, I should say too quiet. And in the death-like silence, I could only hear the sound of my heart beating. I told her what had just happened, and she told me to stay calm, and that the police would be there soon. I was then asked if I had checked that the doors and windows of the house were tightly shut, and I said yes. The operator paused for a moment and suddenly said, "But your back door is still open." What? A sense of foreboding rushed through me. "What did you say? How do you know?" "Because Lisa." She called my name and then giggled. "I'm right outside your door."
I am a photographer, living in a bustling city, in an old flat for a few years. The windows here face the busy streets, and you can see the city lights every night. I am in the habit of taking a night photo from this window every night to record every different night in the city. One night, I was setting up my camera as usual, ready to catch the last glimpse of this quiet night. Just as I was about to press the shutter, I noticed a blurry figure appearing on the camera screen. I felt a twinge of confusion and unease. After all, I lived on the 13th floor, and there couldn't be anyone outside. I stared at the blurred shadow, trying to make out its shape, but it remained indistinct. With even more doubt in my mind, I decided to open the window to see what was going on. There was nothing but the night wind howling outside the window. I gently closed the window and returned to my bed with an unresolved sense of mystery. Despite my best efforts to calm myself, the mysterious shadow remained. Lying on my bed, I kept recalling the details of that shadow, my thoughts gradually becoming blurred, and without realizing it, I entered dreamland. Suddenly, the silence of the night was shattered by a sharp knock at the door. I sat up in panic and listened to the knock, which grew more urgent and closer. I cautiously walked to the door and looked out through the cupola. The corridor was empty, with only the dim light reflecting a blurry shadows. Just as I was about to turn away, a low, unfamiliar voice suddenly rang in my ears.
Alice, let me in.
I turned back into the room to find the camera screen unexpectedly still on, showing the very interior of my flat. And in one corner of the room, the blurred figure was slowly coming into focus. I realized that the shadow had been in the room all along. I let out a scream of terror and tried to run away, but the shadow was already slowly approaching me. Just then, everything suddenly disappeared, and I woke up to find myself still lying in bed in what turned out to be a horrible dream. I shuddered and got to my feet. The sky was already shimmering outside the window. I took a deep breath to calm myself and got out of bed to get a glass of water. Just then, my phone screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. I shakily tapped it open, and the screen showed a picture of the inside of my flat, right in front of the camera I had placed by the window. Immediately after, the phone vibrated again and received a second photo. This time, it was a zoomed-in photo, and I could clearly see the creepy shadow standing in the corner of my camera's screen. The third photo was even clearer, the shadow looming over my room. And the fourth photo was of me sitting on my bed with the shadow close behind me. It was then that I heard that low voice again.
Alice, I'm already in.
A few years ago, my wife and I decided to take a trip away from the hustle and bustle of the city. We booked a great-looking cottage on Airbnb in a scenic area on the outskirts of the city. The weather that day was terrible, with thick fog obscuring most of the view. I turned on my phone's navigation as soon as we left the city and followed the directions carefully. However, the roads were unusually empty, with hardly any other vehicles in sight. This made us feel a little uneasy, but I tried to lighten the tension by telling my wife that we were lucky this year, and that there must be an honor guard ahead of us to help us clear the road. But after a bit more driving, the feeling got worse. The road got narrower and muddier, and it seemed we were heading into some unknown mountainous area. I stopped and checked the address and navigation to make sure we hadn't strayed from our intended route. I felt a bit disbelieving, but decided to keep going. Time was passing and the sky was getting darker. Our journey seemed to go on forever, and the estimated time of arrival on the navigation system was getting longer and longer. My wife and I discussed the situation and decided to give up and go back the way we had come to see if we had missed a junction or taken a wrong turn. So we started back, driving along the road we had just come from. At this point, the navigation started to alarm, saying, "You have deviated from the intended route. Please take a U-turn and return." I did not pay attention. "It will be rerouted at the next junction," I thought to myself. 5 seconds later, the navigation system warned again, "You have deviated from the intended route. Please take a U-turn and return." I drove on, and again the navigation system warned me, then at shorter intervals, faster and faster, and at a seemingly higher and higher volume, until it became a non-stop, "You have deviated from your intended route. Please take a U-turn and return. You have deviated from your intended route. Please take a U-turn and return. You have deviated from your intended route. Please take a U-turn and return. You have deviated from your intended route. Please take a U-turn and return." Followed by a shrill chirp. We freaked out and stopped the car to check our mobile phones. The moment we stopped, a clear, deep sigh came from the phone, and a muffled voice said,
You got away again.
I was so scared that I switched off the phone and accelerated. After a few minutes, we saw other vehicles on the road, and the scenery around us suddenly became familiar. It was as if we had just crossed an incredible border and returned to the normal world. The experience still haunts me, and I can't explain what happened that day. Was it our imagination, or was there really some unknown force in that mist?